everybody, and welcome back to another Mindset Monday. I am your host, Lauren Espy, and today we are joined by a good friend of mine and an incredible counselor out there, Mr. Matt Driggers. Matt and I worked together here at Gwinnett Church. He was a pastor on our staff before moving into full-time counseling. And Matt, we're just so thrilled that you're here today. Thanks for being a part of Mindset Monday.
It is great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It is awesome. Well, Matt is, like I said, a wonderful counselor, but he and his wife have a real passion for helping marriages. And that's not just something they do through his professional side. That's something they have just been known for as a couple. And today we're going to talk about marriage and relationships, and specifically around something that Matt specializes in his practice, which is the idea of conflict. And I don't know about you, but I think in several of my relationships, they've probably experienced a little bit more conflict in COVID-19 than normal. And so today we're going to talk about conflict and how we deal with that. And Matt, the first thing I think about when it comes to conflict is, they usually say there's the conflict aggressor out there that just is ready for it. And then there's the conflict avoiders. And I just would love for you to talk to us a little bit about, how as a conflict avoider do we lean into conflict? Because the aggressors are fine with it, right? But for the avoider out there, and this season has probably stirred up more conflict than normal, how does a conflict avoider lean into conflict, not as a bad thing, but as a necessary thing for growth and movement?
I love the question. And I think you're right. Conflict is absolutely unavoidable, but sadly, connection isn't. Right? It's really, you have to work for connection in a relationship. You don't have to work to have conflict. So if we can find the connection, the conflicts become a whole lot more bearable. And the marriage relationship, there's a lot at stake here, because this is your person to keep you safe. It's the person you're supposed to go to, that's supposed to be there for you. So when that bond gets threatened, that's a really scary place. And whether you're more on the conflict avoider side or on the conflict pursuing side, it's really important for us to recognize that these are just strategies. Some of us learn that the way I keep a connection is I avoid things and I keep to myself. Others of us learn that the way I keep connection is I pursue, I go after it like a bulldog. And they're just strategies. And what we know about these strategies is they worked. They worked for a season. When people come in, these strategies just aren't working anymore. So when we're looking at conflict and the strategies, to really understand the heart of this is about connection and keeping that bond safe with each other. We've just learned to do it in different ways.
Wow, I love that. So if you're out there and you are married to a conflict aggressor, really what they're saying through maybe some demonstrative ways is, I want to connect with you. And
absolutely.
For us as conflict avoiders out there, sometimes when we're hesitant, it's that we just don't want to rock the situation in the marriage. And ultimately what we're scared of is losing connection. And I love that, to be able to say, okay, before we even get into this argument in which we may have differing opinions, my goal is to connect with you. What a great way to start any conversation that may entail conflict. I love that. That's a great point, Matt. Now, when it comes to your practice, you're really helping people de-escalate conflict in their relationships. What are some ways that we help to de-escalate conflict in our marriages and relationships?
So the first thing we do is we understand, what is the pattern? What is the way we have conflict? Whether we're talking about finances, in-laws, or going out to dinner, people generally have the same pattern. So we start really getting familiar with what that is. And we start with, what is the cue? What is the thing your partner does that sends a message to you going, oh, here we go. So what is the cue? And then in response, what do you do with that? What is your response to this? And we start looking at this, and then we ask the next question, what do you start telling yourself? When you pick up on that cue, what do you start telling yourself? And what emotion do you allow your partner to see? And generally that can be frustration. My partner shuts down and I get frustrated. I start yelling, or I shut down, my partner starts yelling. And then we start to ask, well, what is the hidden fear in this conflict? Not the topic, but in the conflict. What's the hidden fear? What's the emotion that's not being seen, that's not being talked about? And what we find is when couples can start plugging in these hidden fears, these hidden emotions, and start talking about that, everything settles down. And now we can talk about in-laws, we can find solutions, or we can just agree to disagree. but our bond is safe because I've now revealed a part of myself that nobody else sees. Nobody else really knows that I feel lonely when you shut down or when you start yelling. I get so scared and sad because we don't have a bond between us. When we can start talking about those places, we can really bring people together.
I love that. I mean, and I think that idea of understanding what your cue is probably something that you can talk about more freely and definitely more neutral when you're outside of the conflict, right?
Absolutely.
But sometimes you're not aware of those things. And counseling plays a huge role in just building our awareness as couples as to what our cues are and what our triggers are, and probably ultimately what our greatest fears are. And sometimes in marriages, or in relationships, there's one person that is wanting to go meet with a counselor and talk about it, and there's someone who is resistant. What would you say to the person who is eager to go and yet is finding resistance from that spouse or partner? And that, what would you say is a effective way by which to meet with a counselor or move forward in that relationship?
And I think that there's two different categories that can fall into. If the person doesn't want to go to counseling because they're done with the marriage, or they think they're done with the marriage and leaning out, that's a very different conversation. And when we have couples that are in that place, we approach counseling very differently because we know that traditional marriage counseling isn't effective when you've got two mixed agendas. One wants it, one's just not even sure they want to be married.
Yeah.
Now the other category is couples who go, I just don't want to go to counseling. I'm embarrassed to ask for help. There's a stigma around it.
Yep.
I get that. Like, bring that to the counselor. And let's be really honest. This is why I don't want to come, and start with that. And I think what you will find is that you're not alone in that. There's a lot of people that feel like reaching out for help means I'm admitting the problem.
Right. Or I'm admitting that I need help, which of course is not an easy thing for any of us to say.
No.
Tell me about what you would say to the couple who finds themselves in that same argument over and over. You know, it's that just cul-de-sac experience where it's like, didn't we yell about this yesterday? What are some ways that they can move on from that cyclical experience?
The first thing I would say, to put it really short, would be whenever there's high emotion, there's a really strong need. And if you're revisiting the same issue and it's really highly emotional, take a time out, because that emotion is signaling something. What is the need that's getting triggered here? And can we start meeting these needs around this issue?
That's great. That's really helpful. Matt, as we go into our week, I mean, really the goal of Mindset Monday is to help give us some practical tools to go into our weeks. What is one thing that you would say to a couple out there, to an individual, that they can do to help de-escalate conflict as they head into this week and all the unknowns that it will probably hold? You know, what is one thing that you would say to them?
Well, if I could give you a couple of bullet points, it would be vulnerable, be specific, and be responsive, and be engaged. Be vulnerable about what you're feeling, be specific about what you need. And on the other side of that, be responsive and be engaged to what your partner is sharing.
That's great. That's great. When someone is trying to be responsive and engaged in that, what are some key things that we can do to show that we're trying to be responsive and engaged to our partner?
Validation. Whatever they are sharing, if you were in their shoes, if I was in their shoes, I'd probably be feeling the exact same thing. And I think that validation is one of the keys to soothing so many arguments. When you're able to look at your spouse and go, I can understand why you would feel like that. There's a sense of, I'm heard. And that's what we need in our relationships, is to be heard.
So go through that list one more time for us of what we can do this week. Tell us that list again.
Yeah. So be vulnerable. Be vulnerable with what you're feeling. Be specific. Be specific about what you need. And on the other side of that is be responsive to that need and be engaged with their feelings. So be vulnerable, be specific, be responsive, and be engaged.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think for many of us in this season, running around, doing things, trying to work remotely for some, all the burdens that are coming in, I think there is power in the pause for all of us to get away and to actually ask, what am I feeling? What do I need in this, before we go launch at our spouse, or anything like that, is to just get away and to actually, just what Matt said, ask those questions of ourselves so that we're approaching a conversation not to bring about conflict, but ultimately to create connection with each other. And those are 4 steps that are great in connecting with our spouse and our partner. So I love that. Matt, thank you so much for helping us today as we head into relationships and conflicts that may ensue. This is really going to help us de-escalate those conflicts. Like I shared with all of you watching earlier, Matt is an incredible counselor and really does help with relationships. Matt, I would love for them to know how that they can stay in touch with you, or for those who are in some seasons of conflict in marriage, be able to reach out to you. Can you share it with us just a moment about that?
I can. You can go to my website, which is just mattdriggers.com. My phone number is on there, or send me an email, which is just matt.driggers@mattdriggers.com. Would love to have a conversation, see if we're a good fit.
I love that. That's great, Matt. Well, thank all of you for watching today, another Mindset Monday. We'd love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the way that you can keep getting these on a weekly basis and hopefully have some more deposits in your life and set your Monday up for success. I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week.